on fire in love with Jesus people I know, and he is in many ways responsible for me being the man that I am today. He is someone who taught me what it means to be a friend and what it means to lay down your life for others. So truly, we are going to be so blessed today. I sat in last service, and I'm going to be sitting in again because it's straight fire. So will you just stand up and honor Riley as he comes up and share God's word with us?
As you can see, they already got me one of these, so if that's any indicator as to what last service looked like. Awesome. Well, I am super honored to be here tonight. For those of you who don't know me, like AJ said, I'm Jordan's one of his younger brothers. I always say younger brother, then the younger was like, well, what about me? Like, there's two of you. Okay, I am one of the younger brothers of Jordan. And I said it last service, but those of you who don't know me, yes, same mom and dad. They tell me that. I've believed it so far. I guess we'll find out one day. Maybe that's the first thing I'll find out when I enter the pearly gates, right? Wait, God, was that really my mom and dad? Where'd the red hair come from? Nobody's got it. But they say someone far back has it. No, I always did think I was adopted, and then our youngest brother, I was there when he was born. That doesn't necessarily mean that I know for sure, but but he came out as a redhead, so I was like, okay, I'm not adopted. So the red hair is justified. So with that, let's just pray as we start tonight. God, I just thank you for this night. Lord, I thank you just for your goodness. Lord, I thank you that we get to come together and that we get to seek your face as a family. Lord, that we get to come into this place and be known by you and be seen by you. Lord, and to be valued by you. And so we just ask you to come. We just position our hearts to receive from you tonight, Lord. We position our hearts just to receive anything you have for us tonight, God. In your precious name. Amen. Amen. Well, I'm going to piggyback. If you guys have been here the last couple of weeks, I think it was 3 weeks ago, Jord talked on joy and just a life of abundant joy and what that looked like. And then the next week he talked about hope and kind of the Christmas morning hope and how, we're supposed to be the most hopeful and joyful people that walk this earth, which I truly do believe. And then AJ talked last week about not taking vacations to joy, but, living in joy. And then he kind of went after entitlement and how entitlement keeps us from experiencing a true joy. It robs us of joy. And tonight, I'm going to kind of piggyback off that. As I was preparing, the Lord just kept speaking Isaiah 66:6 to me, that he's rendering recompense to his enemies. And at first, I was kind of taken back by it. But then the more I kind of thought on it and that it's true, he's rendering recompense to his enemies. And his enemies is anything that keeps us from the abundant life of joy, peace, right? Hope. And so I really feel like tonight is along with AJ's, is just kind of the Lord rendering recompense to the enemies that keep us from living in that place, right? And I have a hard time with it because we live in like the already but not yet kingdom. God said that Jesus, like the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He lay on the cross. He was nailed to the cross. And at the end, he said, it's finished. Right? And so there's like this already finished aspect of the cross that it's like, it's here, it's now, it's for the present. We pray that the kingdom of heaven come on earth as it is in heaven. It's like here. However, at the same time, we still see sickness. We still have disappointment in our lives. Right? We still have things that don't look like the finished work of the cross. And so it's like this. And if you know me, I'm an absolute extremist. And so I absolutely hate tension. Like, I feel like I get in the Bible and I read John 15 and I'm like, oh yes, it's all about abiding. Like, I am just going to abide the rest of my life. I have it figured out. I just have to remain. I just have to be held. Like, I just have to have intimacy with God. And then you read the verses that it's like, I've prepared works for you and you're my co-laborer and greater things I'm going to do through you than I did. And it's like, these tensions of like, well, no, I can't just hide in the secret place all day. But then I get on the other side, well, I'm just going to evangelize. And every person I see, I'm just going to preach. I don't like being in tension because it's always both and, right? It's already, but it's not yet. And so that's why I think the Lord is rendering recompense to the enemies in our life that keep us from that. Because yeah, we have joy in our life. Yeah, we have hope in our life. Yeah, we have this abundant living, but at the same time, we don't. And so like, we can live here, but we can also look and say, okay, well, there's still deeper places for me to go, right? There's still a joy that I don't know yet. There's still enemies in my life that keep me from living in that place. And so that's kind of what I want to go after tonight. I believe that there's no greater joy than being fully known. I think there's nothing in this life that will bring more joy, more hope, and more peace than coming into a place of being fully known and fully seen, where you, like in Genesis, like Adam and Eve stood naked before God unashamed. Like I think that no matter what the circumstances are going around your life, you could be in the mountaintop, the valley, in between. I really don't think your circumstances dictate your level of joy, hope, and peace. But what does is whether you're known or not. And the level that you've allowed yourself to be known. And I think that's what the Lord wants to go after tonight for us. And I think the thing that keeps us back from this the most is self-protection. The enemy that I feel like the Lord wants to go after is self-protection in our lives. Because self-protection, it inhibits us from being known because it inhibits intimacy in our lives. When we choose to self-protect, we don't have intimacy. And when we do not have intimacy, we can't be known. Being known is a byproduct of intimacy. You can't get to know me in an intimate manner from a third party. You can hear about me, sure. You can hear all the facts of my life. You can hear everything I've done, anything I've achieved, anything I've failed at, but you don't know me. You don't have an intimate relationship with me. My mom could sit and tell you every single thing about me, but doesn't mean that you know me. And it goes with people, and it also goes with God. God's all-knowing, yes, but I wonder if he chooses to be all-knowing. In the same way that when Jesus was born, think about this. Jesus, fully God, was born of a woman, limited himself so that he had to learn how to speak, and that he had to learn how to walk, and he had to learn how social cues, and went to school probably, and learned how to, he was a carpenter, right? Make some tables, make some chairs. He limited himself. And I think in the same way, I would argue that God limits himself from knowing us. He's all-knowing. He knows the plans for our life. He knows what he has for us. However, I think in some way, in Matthew, they say, Jesus says, oh yeah, surely, many are going to come to me and they're going to say, Jesus, look, I cast out demons, I raised the dead, I did all these things. And he's going to say, well, depart from me, for I never knew you. So like he can know you without actually knowing you. And I think God sometimes, we're like, yo, like, you see this, like, I have this big need in my life. Why haven't you met it? I have this big thing that I need you to do. And I think God sometimes is like, well, I didn't even know you had that need. You never told me about it. How was I supposed to know? And it's like, whoa. Like, maybe God only knows us to the extent that we allow him to know us. Maybe he only knows us to the extent that we actually tell him about ourselves. In the same way, I don't know about you, only to the extent that you let me in and you tell me about yourself. I would propose that it might be the same with God. That he only knows us to the extent that we allow him to know us. And self-protection hinders that. Because it hinders intimacy. Throughout the Bible, we see these opportunities that God creates, these vehicles per se, that he creates to give the Israelites or Moses, or even in Genesis, Adam and Eve, the opportunity for intimacy. And several times, the examples I'm going to show you, there's plenty more throughout the Bible. I mean, you could kind of read it. Humans are pretty good at self-protecting. We're pretty good at keeping ourselves shut off. But in Genesis, you have Adam and Eve, and they're in the garden. They're made in God's image and likeness. cool breeze is blowing through. The rivers are on all sides. There's trees, there's animals. They give him the rule of the land. And after Adam and Eve eat the fruit, it's really interesting. They then go and they take fig leaves and they sew them up. And it says that they covered themselves and then they hid from God. And I really wonder if the story would be different if in the midst of, we've all been there where we fell short of the glory of God and shame told us to go sew some fig leaves together and cover ourselves and hide from God or hide from people so that they don't know us. I wonder if the story would have been different if Adam and Eve would have eaten of the fruit and they said, okay, yeah, we did that, but like God, here we are still naked, and here it is, we fell short. But instead, they chose to self-protect. They covered themselves. They hid from God. And we do the same thing. We do it with people. We fall short. In my moments when I fall short, do I then just step up forward and expose myself naked before God and say, nope, I'm not going to self-protect? Or do I go take some fig leaves, sew them up, cover myself, and hide? When I do that, it hinders intimacy, and I can't be known. However, when I stumble and fall, if I take a step forward and say, yeah, I fell, and here's my blemish, but here I am, you're known. Adam and Eve didn't do that. They self-protected. Moses, the Israelites, after the fall and everything, there's this big chasm between God and people. And God says, okay, I'm going to use you, Israel. I'm going to use you to show the nations of the world how good I really am. What a people looks like who are mine. And he calls them out of Egypt. And he parts the Red Sea for them. And he walks them across the desert. And they're marching towards the promised land. And they get to Mount Sinai. And Moses goes up on Mount Sinai. And the glory of God falls down on Mount Sinai. And Moses is up there getting the tablets that have the law on it. And when he comes down, his face is shining. And it says that Israel feared him. They were afraid because they saw the glory off his face. And they said, Moses, you have to cover your face now. Put a veil over your face. Because when I see the glory of God shining on your face, it actually exposes the places in my life. And it makes me justify why I'm not experiencing what you're experiencing. I can tell you for myself, I remember when Jordan went away for college, and he really started getting on fire for the Lord, and he would come back. And I had two choices. He would come back and he would tell these miraculous stories and these healings and how he was hearing the voice of God and having these dreams. And it offended me. And I knew every single time him and my mom were going to start talking, I had a choice. I was like, am I going to open up and let what he's experiencing actually expose the lack within me? Or am I going to look at it and justify and say, well, no, that's for Jordan. Like, yeah, Jordan's Jordan, and like he's having these deep encounters, but that's not for me. Like, I'm a little more lighthearted. Like, I like to have fun. Jordan's just like this deep person who just lives in the deep end all the time. So that's just not for me. Like, that was my mindset. I'm not kidding. And he is, and it's beautiful. But like, I think that's what Moses did to the Israelites. It was like he's walking down the mountain and his face shining was exposing to them that like, this was for them as well. But like in the same way that Moses hungered after God, they would. In the way that he was obedient. And it says in the Bible, and I think Moses wrote it, that he was the humblest of men. That makes you kind of question what humility it is, isn't it? Like, come on, seriously. Like, it exposed things to them, and instead of letting it expose and opening up and actually using the opportunity to create intimacy with God, they said, no. Arm's way. Cover your face. When you come back down from that mountain, cover your face. And it says that he goes back up, and when he sits before God, he would take off the veil. And then when he walked back down, he'd put it back on. What a travesty. Because they chose to self-protect, they missed out on this beautiful. I wonder how the story would be different if Israel would have been like Moses, like, teach us how to get up there. Rather than saying, Moses, cover your face, like, nope, I'm not going. What if it would have been like Moses? Like, how did you get up that mountain? How'd you sit with God face to face? How? What did you do for the years when you were exiled out of Egypt? What were you doing when you were the shepherd to your father-in-law's flock and you were walking throughout Sinai? What if they would have taken that posture? It would have exposed them. However, at the same time, it would have created an opportunity for intimacy and to be known in those places, to be exposed and seen. The story could have been different. It could have been much different. Move on. Israel's always just a great example to kind of poke fun at. I wonder when we get to heaven if all the Israelites will be like, yeah, you guys always love to use us as like the negative example, but like you weren't there, They complained. They were like, oh, we want Egypt's food, But hey, thanks for them. We can learn. Anyways, Israel gets established as a nation, right? Samuel's the prophet in 1 Samuel. And they came into the promised land. God literally stopped the Jordan River. They walked across the dry river. They enter into the promised land. They take Jericho. They start taking the land of the Canaanites and the Jebusites and the Philistines. And God's given them victory after victory. And then they get to a point where they're like, Samuel, we want a king. Give us a king. We want to be like the rest of the nations. All those nations we just conquered, we want to be just like them. Anoint us a king. And Samuel's like, no, you don't want a king. And God's like, no, you don't want a king. I want to be your king. I want the lack thereof a king to actually give you an opportunity to be an intimate people with me so that I can show the world what I can do through my people. So I can show the world who I am. And they go back to Samuel like, no, Samuel, dang it, we want a king. What are we going to do when the nations around us rise up and are at our doorstep? Who's going to rally the troops? Who's going to be our protector? Who's going to be our leader? Samuel's like, no, you don't want a king. And then finally God's like, Samuel, anoint them a king. If they want a king is what they get. Now, I wonder what God was thinking in the moment. It was like, I created this beautiful opportunity for them to expose themselves. And in moments of fear of the unknown, or fear what was next, or needing direction in their lives, I actually created this beautiful opportunity for them to come to me and to have intimacy with me and for me to actually know them and their need and for them to feel known. And instead, they chose to self-protect. Instead, they said, no, give me a king. I want the steering wheel in my hands. I want my life in my control. I want to be able to call on a king who I can see in the flesh, who will rise up an army that will go fight on my behalf. I wonder how the story would be different. And Samuel goes, well, okay, I'll anoint you a king, but like the king, he's going to oppress you. Your kings will oppress you. They'll lead you astray. They'll lead you into wickedness. And you read half the Bible, I swear, and it's like, well, this king came into power, and then they led him to this, and they were wicked, and then they get exiled into Syria, and then they're exiled in Babylon. And it's like, how would the story have been different if instead of saying, give us a king, Samuel, would have been like, God, you're our king. And yeah, this is exposing, but this is an opportunity for us to increase and steward and cultivate intimacy with you so that you actually can know us and that we can know you. How much the story would have been different if they wanted to self-protected. If they would have said, God, you're our king. It's an interesting question. Those were a few examples of the situations and the vehicles, per se, of which God used to create the opportunity for intimacy and for the Israelites to be known. And I think he does it a little bit differently today. I think the vehicle which he uses is a little bit different. I always wonder why God adopted us. Why did he have to adopt us? Why didn't he just set us free from sin? If you read it in Ezekiel 46, it talks about how there was this practice basically that if a prince took a piece of his inheritance, so something that was like of his kingdom or his, and gifted it to a slave, it was considered their year of liberty. They were free from bondage, right? So there's like this, I think it's a beautiful picture of like, why couldn't Jesus have just done that? Why didn't he just take himself, his inheritance, the kingdom of heaven, God himself, be nailed to a cross, set us free from sin, bondage, whatever, you name it, make a way back to God, a way back to heaven. Why then adopt us? I think about this. You could have just set us free from sin. You could have just set us free from our bondage. You didn't have to adopt us. And I would suggest that the reason that he adopted us, the reason he calls himself Father, the reason that he adopted us as sons and daughters, is because he doesn't want to use the lack of a king to produce intimacy in our lives anymore. He doesn't want to use the lack of a king to give us an opportunity to be known. He doesn't want to use the opportunity to see a leader on a mountaintop with his face shining. Yes, there's modern day like equivalencies that I think are true. However, the way that God wants to make us known is through family now. Him as our Father and us as his children. He adopted us, I think, because he wanted to create a family, because family is where intimacy is developed, and where there's intimacy, people are known. And when you're known, you experience the abundant life, because it doesn't matter what season you're in. You could be up high, you could be down low, but if you're fully known by God and by the people around you, you have it. I'm convinced. You have it. You have the abundant joy, you have the hope, you have the peace, because you're known, you're seen. And so I think he adopted us because this is his vehicle now. You, the people next to you, are the vehicle which he wants to produce intimacy in your life so that you can be known. He wants to use family to make you known. Known to him and known to one another. And I'm going to be the first to confess, like, I'm preaching to myself more than anybody tonight. I am your poster boy for self-protection. Nothing like your mom saying amen, right? Truly, though, family is our vehicle now to be known by people and known by God. And I'm your poster boy for self-protection. You know, when I was like 8, 9 years old, we were at family camp up in Cascade, and there was like a breakout session. I remember my mom, we were on the patio, and my mom looked at me and she said, "Riley, the day that I feel like you open up, I'll give you $100. And I was like, shoot. So like literally for like the years to come, I would like give her a tiny sliver of like, here's the tiniest little sliver of my heart, like tiny bit you can know me. And I'd be like, hey, can I have my $100 now? And she's, nope. I wanted that $100, but I didn't want that $100 because it would have required something of me, something that I wasn't willing to give. And self-protection was exposed at its highest in my life when I was about 16 or 17 years old. My eyes were opened. I got to a place where I had pushed people out of my life so far, and I had pushed God out so far that I didn't think I needed people. I loved the Lord. I don't know if I let him know me, but I definitely didn't let people know me. I pushed everybody far away to the point where I was like, shoot, I'm 16, but like I don't need people. I don't need my mom. I don't need my dad. I don't need my friends. Like I don't need people. I can do this on my own. And so, I got to a place where I was just like so over life and so over just like I don't need people. My parents were actually visiting colleges with Jordan, and my grandparents were staying with us. And at like midnight, I just Googled, where's the farthest place from Idaho I can go without a passport? And I had two options. It was Puerto Rico or Guam. I was like, well, I haven't been to either. I looked up on a map, and Guam was clearly farther away from Boise than Puerto Rico. And so I walked downstairs into my parents' bedroom where my grandparents were staying. They were asleep, and I grabbed my grandpa's wallet, and I wrote down his credit card number real quick and went back upstairs to kayak.com. And at this point, it's about 2 a.m. in the morning, and I'm like, when's the quickest flight? When's the soonest flight? So I bought a ticket right there at 2:30 in the morning for $1,500, one-way ticket to Guam. And 3 hours later, I was at BOI. But like, it sounds so extreme, but it didn't even register with me. I didn't need people. I didn't need them. Long story short, I ended up getting arrested in Portland, Oregon at the airport and get put in a juvie cell. And my favorite part about this whole story, I get to the juvie cell in Portland, and there's like, I'm kind of like in more of a holding room, not like, fully booked in there. But there was like these two guys at the front desk, and they were like, brother, we heard you tried to run away to Guam? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, and they go, oh man, like, we're from Guam, brother. We've been wanting to go back for so long. And they're like, but those plane tickets, they're so expensive. I'm like, well, it wasn't that bad for me. I didn't pay. I was like, yeah, $1,500 one way. That might have been, I've never booked a flight 2 hours before it took off. But anyways, when I got to the airport, the lady at the desk was like, so why are you going to Guam? I was like, I had seen that there was a Navy base there. So I was like, oh, my mom works for the Navy. And so I'm just flying from Boise to Guam. She's like, okay, here's your ticket. But anyways, that's the place that I was at. Like, I didn't need people. I didn't know what intimacy was with people. I completely self-protected to the point where I ran away to Guam, or attempted to. It was about 2 months after that I had an experience that forever changed my life. My parents' marriage was struggling, and they were going on a trip just to get away to Mexico. And I was in a really rough place still. Really didn't want to be around. And, my mom called me Jordan had taken him to the airport. It was about 5 o'clock in the morning, and my mom called me, and she said, Riley, we're at the airport. Your dad had got, like, a cash out for the trip, and it was in, like, one of those little bank envelopes for cash. And she's like, we can't find it anywhere. And the desperation in her voice, it, like, still rings in my mind, but she was like, I need this trip, Riley. So you need to find this money and bring it to me right now so we can take off. Because her flight was in like an hour or two. And me, as kind of a disgruntled teenager and in a bad place, was just like, oh, all right, like, whatever. She's like, I want you to look in your dad's office. I look in my dad's office, I can't find it. She goes, okay, look in the kitchen, look here, and I'm going everywhere, I can't find it. She goes, your dad was burning, he was like paying bills, and then he was like throwing like the bills into the fireplace because the fire was running. It was like a wood burning one. She's like, look in the fire, he was like burning bills. And I was like, okay. So I go and I look in the fireplace, and there's a bunch of ashes. There's nothing there, and so she stops and she goes, Riley, I need you to open up your heart to me. Or I need to, well, she's been saying that since I was like 4, but at that point. But no, she says, Riley, I need you to open up your heart to God. And I was like, open up my heart to God. I'm trying to find this envelope. Like, I'm not why do you always have to make everything spiritual, Mom? Like, I'm like, no, I can't find the money. And she's like, no, Riley, I need you to open up your heart to God. And I was like, oh, fine. She's like, pray after me. She says, God, I open up my heart to you. Show me where this money is. And I pray it back. I say, God, I open up my heart to you. Show me where this money's at. Half genuine, probably, not half not. And right at the end, my mom goes, it's in the fireplace. Go back to the fireplace. I walk back to the fireplace, and there's a bank envelope with $100 bills sitting on the top of the ashes. Don't ask me how. I don't even know if I believed in miracles at that point. I think I was just like, I grabbed it, took it to the airport, And I was just like, I don't know. I don't even think I thought about it, to be completely honest. I came back home and honestly was in a pretty bad place. The next day, I was at church, and I don't know if I'd really ever raised my hands at church at that point. I was just kind of going. I was a 16-year-old kid just trying to, like, find my way through life, I feel like. And during that service, the presence of God came over me in a way that forever changed my life. And I fell on the ground and I just started crying. And I hadn't cried in like 6 or 8 months. I couldn't feel at that point. And as I started crying, the Lord spoke to me like 3 or 4 times, and I'd never heard the voice of God before. And he said, Riley Allen Verner, I'm with you and you're gonna be okay. Riley Allen Verner, I'm with you and you're gonna be okay. And I heard it like reverberate like 3 times. And something like broke off me in that moment. And I truly believe that I had this encounter with God because for like 5 seconds, half genuine, half probably like just let me just pray this so I can be done with it. I said, God, I open up my heart to you. It was like this tiny little act of saying, I'm not gonna self-protect anymore. Like I actually open up myself to you to be exposed. And the next day I had an encounter with God that like I tasted hope for the first time. I tasted joy and freedom in a way that like I didn't know if it was still out there for me. But the most profound part of it all for me was my mom came back a week later. And I knew I came to a moment and I could choose. I had the choice to self-protect and to say, no, it's just me and God. And I had this encounter, but it was just between me and you. That I'm gonna cover myself and hide. That I'm gonna be my own king. Or I had the option in that moment to share with my mom what happened. And I was outside shooting hoops, and she walked out, and I knew it was like this pivotal moment in my life that I was gonna choose whether I was gonna self-protect and I was gonna keep myself hidden from people, or I was gonna allow myself to be seen and known. I can honestly tell you that if I wouldn't have opened up there, even with that encounter with God, I don't think I'd be where I'm at today. I honestly give it credit to the fact that I opened up. And yes, it was my mom, but it's with people. And because I opened up, I allowed my mom and I to have an intimate moment. And in that moment, I became known. And I think I experienced more joy in that moment than I'd experienced in the whole last year. And we all come to this opportunity. This is the story of all of our lives on a daily basis. The reality of it is that we all self-protect because we don't want to be in pain. We don't want to hurt. I don't want to hurt. I don't want to be in pain. But the reality is that our need for people is so much greater than our fear of abandonment and rejection. So much greater. Your need for people is so great that it outweighs any fear you could ever have of actually opening up yourself to somebody so that they could know you. Your need to be known is so wide and so deep that you can't run from it. And then if you do, it'll be a hard journey. And I almost didn't even want to share like my story, and because it's kind of extreme. But like I didn't get to that point because one day I said I'm gonna self-protect. I got to that point because I made little micro decisions for like several years, and I had many little tiny opportunities to open myself up to God and to people, but I chose self-protection instead. And so we all have that. We all have these little micro decisions of whether we're gonna go sew figs together and cover us and go hide from God. We all have little micro decisions to say, oh, well, yeah, that person kind of offends me, and like, why are they experiencing that, but I'm not? And rather than stepping into it and actually letting it expose the places in you so that you can actually come into a deeper place of intimacy and being known. We all have these opportunities. It's what we do with them that matter. Sorry. And that's why the abundant life of joy and peace and hope, it doesn't matter what season of life you're in. It doesn't matter if you're experiencing the greatest favor and having the best job opportunities and at the best place in your marriage or the best places with your family, or you're in the exact opposite. If you live in that place where you say, no, God, I vow to you that I'm not going to self-protect from you or from the people who I need most in my life. That's why, you can go through the seasons of life and it doesn't matter what come, because throughout it all, you're known by the people in your life and also by God. And when you're known, there's nothing greater. We all have this deep longing to be known. And when we feel known, I think that's the abundant life. I think that's the life of hope. I think that's the life of peace. I think it's the life of joy. So if you're running from intimacy, with God or people, in the same way Adam and Eve covered themselves, in the same way that Israel asked for a king, and what you're saying to God in essence is that your ways are actually, or my ways are actually higher than your ways. And God, your ways are actually lower than my ways. And I'm actually going to rely on myself a lot more than I rely on you. And the fruit of that is that you're going to miss out on joy. And you're going to miss out on peace. And you're going to miss out on hope. Because his ways are higher than our ways. Much higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. The way he orchestrates things are different than the way we would. A life of self-protection, it'll hinder intimacy. And it will keep you from being known. It'll keep you on an island. We weren't made to live on islands. Not islands with God, not islands with any people. We were made to be fully known and fully loved. So we have a ministry team that I'm just going to invite up. And if we could just all stand together. I know time's running out.